This is going to be a overview, I guess. No, it's not good. It's not really overview. It's in depth. Uh, Basically, how to use Warcraft logs to self-improve, no matter the class, no matter the role, no matter the spec, stuff like that. So let's just go ahead and look at Paintsmith. And so I'm not even gonna start with you. I'm gonna, like I said, it's just as the starter, the core principles are gonna apply to everyone. I'm just gonna look at everyone, right? So the thing that mostly applies to everyone, including tanks, just in a different way, is how you deal with damage taken. Because, right, if you die, then you're not usually not playing the fight right. Very seldom are you supposed to die. And then I'll pick you just because you're a hunter here, and I gave it, and you're give me your name. So I guess I can see first. Let's see if anyone did die. All right, so this person died over 34 seconds. And you can see, is a class, so I guess I should go a little slow on some of these things. You can look at deaths on your death screen. You can see the last 3 hits. This is usually not, won't usually tell you much unless you're getting one shot. The biggest thing you can see is how long it took you to die. This is, I believe it's how long you've been below 80%, 75%. This is how long you were unhealthy for. This is how much damage you took in that window. It's how much healing you took in that window, right? So person who died over the longest point. We'll skip the healer for now, just because it's a little different. So you can see, sometime over here they were at full, got pretty low, got decently healthy, and then just kind of ticked away. This screen, this death overview, will have the full time since healthy in here. And the biggest things you can look for is like how do you live, right? Because assuming you're not a healer, you can't always heal yourself. So how do you live in this 28 seconds? What could you've done differently? Down here, survivabilities. You can see when they last used survivability. So it looks like they didn't use either of theirs in this window. And over here on the right, you can see what buffs they had. So if you're looking through the buffs, it does require that you know the icons a bit, which I do, because I play Warlock. And just double checking that, yeah, I'm not seeing any, right? So died to 5k overkill, and they took, I forgot who I was looking at, Sugarfox. They took 221k damage and died to a 5k overkill. A defensive at any point during this like 30-second window would have saved their life. And the question is, how do you know, right? Assuming you're not looking at raid guides, assuming you're not looking at WoWhead, assuming you're just doing the raid and all you have is Warcraft logs. How do you know like when you should defensive, basically? And that's what damage taken windows for. So you can see a graph here of like when they're taking damage, when they're taking the most damage specifically, right? And we do know that they die over here, but we can ignore that for now. And we can say, so across the most of the fight, we're taking about 2 to 3k damage across the majority of the fight, because you can't use it defensive on everything. That would just be wasting it usually. So we can see though, so assuming 3k, we have like an 8k spike here, an 8k spike here, a 6k spike. 4 is pretty close to 3, right? So, but here and here, we're taking like triple our normal damage, and here like double. So these two things at 1 minute and 5 minutes are definitely things we want to consider defensiving. So then the question is like, what's doing the damage there, right? So we can zoom in. You can see 2 things are happening here. One is this person has chains on them. The other is that traps are going off at the same time. So raid wide mechanic and also a tank hit. So 2 raid wide mechanics and a personal mechanic overlapping each other made them take way more damage than the rest of the fight normally. You can also see it here, but it doesn't look quite. It can be a little deceiving here. So, but we can see chains, traps, Chris Max. And so let's see the same thing here. So we can see basically the same thing. So traps, tank hit, and chains at the same time. So you can say every time you get chains, use a defensive, maybe. But we can say at least for sure, if chains is overlapping with something, you should use a defensive. As far as this person, it's this overlap of the 2 or 3 that mean that a defensive saves you, and without it, you're kind of just hoping the healer save you. For tanks, it's a little trickier because tanks have strong defensive or mitigation up at different times. So even though you're taking more damage here at 12k-ish than here at 7.5k-ish, that might be because you use a better defensive here, and they were both really should have been like 12k. So for tanks, it's very useful to look at raw damage, because that ignores any mitigation you used. So tanks, you can see on this fight, a 30k, 30k, 30, I'm rounding, of course, 30k peaks, and then a couple 20k spikes. So if you're just tanking this fight or looking at someone else's logs, like a different Guardian Druid's logs, to see how you should tank this fight. Okay, what are these 30k hits that are hitting? Those you definitely want something big for these 30k hits. That's way higher than anything else you're going to take in the fight. You can zoom in and see. And then, so right now it'll be tank specific, but I'll go through the same a branching principle of how to use cooldowns, not just damage or defensive cooldowns, just anything with a real cooldown. The principle is going to be the same for all 3 specs, but I'll need to go to roles, not specs. All 3 roles, but since I'm on tank, I'll start with tank. And the idea is that typically, unless even if you're in Hall of Fame, top 100 or really like 200 or 300 guilds in the world, you're probably not going to be like really innovating your class on the fight or anything like that. Sure, there are things that you can do differently, or like things change across a tier. I'm not saying I'm not saying you can find a perfect log or that you shouldn't change anything, but 80% of what someone that has killed it before you does is going to be probably a pretty good basis to see what you should do. So let's say this Surrender, this Painsmith log. I won't close this. I think these are the same thing though. Yeah. So let's say this didn't go as well as we thought it did, and we wiped at Painsmith. So I want to see. So we just went over how if we wiped, I died, how I could have lived better, how I could have done my job better. But let's say I didn't die, right? So that there was other stuff. Obviously, it's obvious when someone dies, especially if it's a tank or healer or someone doing a specific mechanic, that they die. Okay, we wipe because they died. That's easy. But there's plenty of wipes where no one dies, and it's a rapid wade wipe or something like that. So we can see how other people have killed it. Heroic. We're just looking at Guardian Druids, so we'll keep with that. Obviously, we want to look at kills. We don't look at wipes. And then if you just do this, you can get some pretty mixed results. One of the best things to do is to put a minimum pull length here. The best thing you could do is to match it to what your kill time should be. Depending on how far you whipped into the fight, you might have no idea what that is. And then the best thing to do is just like you start high, you start way past whatever the enrage could be. Give it a second. Right, so and then just step down. I usually do by 100 until you start finding logs. And what that does is it'll show you. Usually you don't want to do it with 1, but that means that we can go to like 550 instead of 500. A lot of people do is they go to like rankings or statistics. I misclicked on Soul Render. That's painful. Okay, yeah. And same stuff. So instead of going to like the logs page, you go to like the rankings page, and I say, okay, like here's the top U.S. Guardian Druid in this fight. Here's the top U.S. Guardian Druid without PIs. And they look at this guy, and they look at what he's doing. And what the top in the world is doing is not going to be what you're doing. And if it is, like that's for a very different reason. That's not going to tell you how you killed the boss the first time. That's going to tell you how you pad on the boss, basically. It's going to tell you how to kill it when you're struggling is this, going to people that are also struggling alongside you, basically. And then generally, if they're just default name, Sanctum Domination, whatever raid we're in, I usually ignore it. Just because they're not going to be very detailed. So from here you can see this, and then we can look at the same things. Damage taken, because it's tank, we can look at raw damage taken when they're taking stuff. Stuff like that. But for the sake of, we have a kill time. The principle's the same, it's just, if you don't have a kill time, that's the next best thing you can do. No matter your class, spec, role, finding the log you want to look at, that step is going to be the same. What you do exactly in the log will be a bit different. So this is a tank. So we already did this step. We can see, like, we know what he should be mitigating because we already did that step as a tank. But let's say you're not sure you're doing it the best, or you're having a problem like with uptime, like you don't have a defensive for every single one of the dual blade scythes. Well, maybe this guy didn't because this one looks like it hit him a little harder, but we can still see how he used his defensives. So you can go to the casts, and let's switch to this for a second. So you can see the order he pressed every single button throughout the entire fight. It does help if you know the spec that you're looking at here, but you don't need to for this, because let's just say I have no idea what a Guardian Druid does, and I don't have a great idea. Doesn't matter. You can go down here and just look at the things they're casting rarely. So 9 and less, we can say. And let's say 6 and less, because 6 and less means it's about once a minute. So without knowing the class at all, I can say these among these are their cooldowns. His actual defensives are Bark Skin. And if you click this plus, it'll pin it up here so we can refer to it later. And we have a big list up here, which can get messy to look at, but we can go back to our damage taken and they'll stay with us, right? It's be really annoying to just scroll up and down and try to like line up exactly, drag my mass down to see when he actually used it. Luckily we don't have to. We can graph them. Instead of separate, we can graph them all in the same. And now we can see these lines about where they're actually casting things. If I hover over it, it even tells me exactly what they're casting, right? Barkskin and Aegis. It doesn't have to be done for just any... sorry, that's not just done for tanks. The same idea applies for any class. All right, you can go to same thing, Beastmastery Hunter, go to casts, just scroll down to the things that are used rarely. And instead of going to damage taken, because we're not looking at tank, we'll go to damage done. So it makes sense that if these are his cooldowns, again, assuming I have no idea what the class are, is if these are the big damage cooldowns, it makes sense that right after them or during them, we're seeing their damage go up. So it means that even if we have no idea what the class is, we're on track, that our idea is right. So we'll assume that the boss has like add damage phases basically. So you can change from damage done by ability, which is default. Let's go back to the table, right? This is what you normally see if you look here. But we can see what they're doing damage, what they're actually hitting with their damage by going to like done to enemy. So we can see that some of the spikes line up with add AoE, basically. And that just means that Wild Spirits is a 2-minute cooldown. They use it on pull, but they don't use it again at 2 minutes. There's a right, it's missing here. It's wait till 3:21. And right, without knowing the fight, you ask why, and then you can go over here and see that they're holding it because it's going to line up with if they hold it right, they use it exactly at 2. There's no ads, and then it wouldn't be up until 4 when the ads are basically over. So by holding it a bit, they can line it up with the ads. And the last thing, but same concept applies for healers. And so then you look at damage taken for tanks, damage done for DPS. You just look at healing for healers. You can see when they're getting good healing done, 3 and 530-ish. One thing that's specific to healers is, right, you can't... if a DPS slams hero, potion, and all their cooldowns on a boss, they're basically going to do damage no matter what, unless the boss is immune. But if a healer slams potion, hero, and all their healing cooldowns, but the raid's already at full, they're still going to do 0 healing. So one thing you might actually want to start off with a healer is look at raid-wide damage taken, so that you can see when there's actually healing that needs to be done. So we can see about a minute, somewhere around 3, 5:30, and then we can go to healing and see that. So probably this healer didn't worry about a minute, but this healer got the 3:30 and the 5:30. And same thing, we just go to casts, look at what they're using rarely. They're on Flourish, that's mobility, so we skip it. Skip that because it's not actually healing done, and then we can throw in Convoke. Go to their healing, change into Graph on main, Convoke. You can also, similar to what we were doing for takes before, you can look at raw healing, which will ignore overheal, or include overheal, I mean. So we see this Convoke didn't really do a lot of healing, but this one did. These did. Obviously, Trank did a lot here. This Convoke did quite a lot. So this requires you. The question is why is this Convoke not doing a lot of healing? What these two are, and that's probably because this was a damage Convoke, but that means you need to know the class, so we can just ignore that for now. But this still means that this is just like the check step to make sure that the things we chose, the abilities we chose to actually look at, Flourish, Tranquility, and Convoke, are actually strong healing abilities like we thought they were. Because if you don't know the class and you're just picking just everything that they use rarely, you're going to get some things that are wrong. Like we got rid of trinkets on the tank. So once you know, or if you already know the class and you already know that, let's say I main Destruction Lock. So I know exactly what I'm going to look at. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to look at his Infernal and his Dark Soul, because that's all I care about, because I know everything else doesn't matter. Then I'm just going to skip the step of checking because I know exactly what this class does. I'm going to see when he's using them. The step about going to healing or damage done is really only important if you're looking for why they're using it there, or if you're not sure what abilities actually matter. But once you do know, you just go to resources. Again, resources is just like the cheat, so we don't see every single cast in the entire game. We just want to look at the ones we want to see. And you can copy paste if you need to. Again, just pause for any questions.
Questions. Well, have you ever noticed sometimes I was looking at logs and comparing to someone else, and there'll be like, the top ability that does damage, for example, between the two, and like the number of casts are really close together, but their DPS is a lot higher. So when I see like the average hit or the average crit or whatever is more damage than like mine, is there a way to like dig down into that to understand, why is theirs hitting for so much more DPS when it's similar item levels, like similar secondaries?
I want to say yes, but it might be like specific. So let's see
I
if we can
mean,
like
yeah,
find
it
a
could be like
example.
any cast or anything like that. Like,
So
uh,
yeah, 'cause I had to log up to had to do demonology logs. So their chaos bolts don't, but their conflict rates do, right? So 45 on this guy, doing 407k. 46, so an extra cast on this guy, but doing way less.
right.
Uh, so then you can look at crit percent. That maybe that's it. So this guy's critting 22. This guy's critting 44. So he's critting twice as much. Uh, and then we can go. So we think maybe that's the answer. Maybe it is just crit variance. I misclicked that. If we go into the events, we can see like right every individual damage done. So we can see this guy's doing normal hits for 4 to 5k, a little bit of variance, but then like procs, and so he's critting for double 10 to 12k.
Yeah. Like for example, from a DPS perspective, what I have normally been doing is I will go to the rankings, the All-Star DPS, and then I will look and see what the top parsers are doing to try and emulate what they do. Now, I also know that that can be a trap because a lot of times they either have a really strong raid or they're doing some really janky shit to try and get those parses.
Yep.
So, what is the recommended way to fine tune rotations and cooldowns and stuff without being caught in one of those traps?
Great question.
More so, I mean, is it okay to go to those rankings and look at some of them, and you can obviously discard the ones that have PI and stuff
Yeah,
like that, but you can filter them in such a way to try and get it as close to your current like kill times as possible to
right.
try and get a balanced view. But is there a better way?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
another place to go and look?
So absolutely, uh, to or absolutely to yes, there's a better way than just going to all stars. So getting to the long question about uh, you do a fight, we're just trying to like better optimize a fight. Uh, just even though we've never had problems with the fight, we've done it on farm. I have to make sure I'm doing my job correctly, basically. Uh, my KT needs work. That's my lowest by a lot. And then we can go to my best pull and say, okay, right, how do I get better at, like, how do there's clearly room for improvement. Where is it? And then I think someone mentioned they went to the All Stars as like the jumping off point. Right, and so if you look at my damage, 7.6k is doing double my damage. So clearly room for improvement, even if we ignore buffs. Right, there's a couple. I guess the question is, do I just open this log and compare? You can. I guess like I discourage it because especially if you're looking at just one log. So far everything I've done has been looking at one log, obviously, because it's for time. But I would not do that even if I was looking for like when I should use tank cooldowns. I wouldn't look at just one log because that tank might just be bad, basically. You never know if you just pull up one log. I think the first question was like opening all stars and like looking at that. I think looking at any one of these is a bad idea. But luckily there's some stats here at the top. So we don't need to look at one of them, we can look at all of them. And so we can still look at some pretty key things like talent choice, right? So demonic strength, calling, right, blah, 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 blah. Talents to take here, the gear you take here, the soul binds and stuff. That is useful info you can pull from the top 100, PI or not. What covenant, you can refine it. Let's say I'm Night Fae and I'm running Dreamweaver. Like I could hone in. Let's not take Dreamweaver yet. Let's just say I'm Night Fae. I'm not gonna swap covenants. Then we can see it's about 50% take Dreamweaver, 50% take Naya. So could go either way on that one. But trinkets I'm gonna want these trinkets. I'm gonna want these talents. I'm gonna want these conduits. this legendary, blah 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 blah. Or so that's like the first step above just looking at a few logs. The step above that is this is top 100 logs throughout KT. But what if I could do better? What if I could do top 500 throughout KT? Now I get a little bit better stats, so I can see two people use a different legendary, but their damage went way down. So I should probably still use this legendary. Ignoring the defensive talent, so this is the first like offensive talent that's different, but their damage went way down below these guys. So I still want to probably stick with these talents. Still about 50-50 split, a little bit more on Naya now, but you can see the damage. This is an average damage. This is max damage, right? So this might just be like one guy playing way better with Dreamweaver. So take those with a grain of salt. If it's just like a one-to-one comparison, right? If it's a talent choice and we can see the best person with all the combos that use a different talent is still better, it's pretty safe that this is not the right talent. It's not quite so obvious that this is like the better Soulbind though. But they're both pretty safe, right? So their max damage is pretty close, and the amount of people taking both is about 50-50. And you can look at the same thing, like your exact branches of the Soulbind tree to take, what condos they put in, what shards they use, everything that you want here. The top 500 logs in this fight. And that is raid.subcreation.net. And you can go to that for any boss, heroic or mythic, any class. It does, however, only look at damage done. So even if I look at a disc priest in this fight, I guess I look at HPS, but HPS isn't always like the best way to look at healers, or very rarely the best way to look at healers. So I'd say this site can definitely be used for anyone. It's just if you're not a DPS, you have to make sure you're like taking it with a grain of salt. You can still like look at what legendary to use, right? I still probably definitely want Clarity of Mind if I'm a Disc Priest, with 98% of people using it, and with more people also this time, about almost 5,000 instead of 500. I still probably want one of these two talent choices. I just basically want to ignore the actual HPS column and just look at why and look at how many people are using what, and not how much healing they're doing with it. So so this is a better, it's a higher sample size than just looking at the top 100. So generally that's going to give you better results because, let's go back up, because probably picked a bad fight because there's a reason most people don't play Demonology on this. But it's still better than 100 to make it a little easier, right? So this is me on the left. I'm the one where I'm trying to improve myself. So look at my talents. Okay, I'm running all the same talents as the top. Go to my legendaries. I'm running the right legendary. Go to my covenant. Running the right covenant. Go to my conduits. They're not going to be right exactly the right order, but potency conduits are what we care about on damage. So Fail Commando, Tyrant Soul, Born of Blood, Tyrant Soul, Fail Commando. So I'm running everything correctly, but I'm still not doing enough damage, basically, or as much as I think I could be. So it's not a preparation error. I have prepared for the fight. I prepare my character for the fight correctly. It's a gameplay error. So that site's not going to help with that. Question is, am I playing my class correctly in the first place? Right? I took all the right talents, took all the right gear, took all the right conduits. Am I just playing wrong? And so the best way to see that is Raidbots to do sim. So The APL stands for Action Priority List. It's basically what you should cast when for your character, and they're typically made by someone uh, someone in the, like, for example, in my case, the demonology warlock community, who just like understands the class very well and wrote like in what conditions you should cast what abilities. And I did that. And so if you, like I said, I logged out in destruction, so I can't type in my character name here, but you could if you logged out in the right stuff. So I had to do it elsewhere, but this is what I got. And so the first thing to look at is where your damage is coming from, the same way we did before. Nope. So about 19% should be my Tyrant. That's pretty close. My Imp should be 16%, so my Imps are like way behind. My Felguard should be 14. My Felguard's ahead. Dreadstalker's 10. Dreadstalkers are right. Bloodlink 9. Bloodlink's right. Demon Bolt 7. So I'm losing on Demon Bolts. Vile Fiend 4.8. Losing on Vile Fiend. So there's plenty of things like I'm losing on. Just at a baseline damage breakdown, where my damage is coming from. But the big things are right. Like my Tyrant's my biggest cooldown. That's pretty close. Dreadstalkers are pretty close. So it's not like I'm just blanket missing stuff. Some things are right on track, some things aren't. So let's say I'm like not sure yet. You can scroll down. And this will look like what I had before, which is my cast events, right? So basically look the same thing. So you can't see 0 on logs for some reason, but you can see 1.1 Vile Fiend, 1.2 Vile Fiend. Dreadstalker's at 5, Dreadstalker's at 6, so a bit late, but close. And then I can go through all of it and see that I'm actually casting buttons correctly, or pressing buttons correctly. Or I can also look at sometimes it's easier to visualize on this, that way it's not like all numbers and stuff. At least on the opener, and I could go through the full 6-minute fight and see like where I go wrong. But that means at least for the opener, when everything's like ready and there's no mechanics or whatever, I do know how to play my class, right? So everything's lining up correctly. I'm pressing the buttons in the right order. Then what I can look at, this is the last site I have, and I didn't make the site, but I do apologize for the name still. Lorrgs.nw.r.appspot.com. No idea, but it's very useful still. Unfortunately, I can go to looking at Kel'Thuzad for turn off everything that isn't Night Fae, Demonology locks, and I can even try to get it closer. So this is going to be a lot. I guess I should probably say what I'm looking at first. Oh. So at a baseline, what this is on the top is what the boss is doing per time, right? So he's doing Frost Blast, Frost Blast, Frost Blast, Howling Blizzard, blah, 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 blah. And all the other rows are what, I guess the top 50 Demonology locks are doing. And so there's some info you can get right away, which is that basically everyone's using their cooldowns on pull. Makes sense. Then we get a little bit of discrepancy already on the second cooldown. Should they be used right away, which a lot of people do? Hold them. Some people do. Right, so this is going to tell you, kind of like we were looking before at when people are casting what. It's going to tell you when it's just basically the same thing. It's just a lot more people that you're looking at rather than just opening up a log and trying to find it. And I think it doesn't say it here, but I think this is mythic only. So that does take a little bit away, but KTs are pretty much the same fight. But I can do better because this is quite a bit of variance. I'm looking at for a kill time around 6 minutes. So let's say 5:45 to 6:45. Still quite a few partials. Alright, so that's better. So I have 3 people doing the fight and around the same time. I guess it doesn't filter out the top log for some reason, so I guess I'm only looking at these 2 actually. And now I can see what they're doing differently. They're pretty close to the same damage. I can see like if they're holding abilities. So it doesn't look like the only hold is here. Between 4 minutes 20 and almost 6 minutes. Because so far he's been casting his Vile Fiend every 1 minute. Just about exactly 1 minute on the spot. But then there's something missing. It's missing at 5:20, right? And he holds it until 5:50. So it means it wouldn't have been up over here. That's maybe that's now I can go look at mine. Look at my Vile Fiend.
Do you know?
Mhm.
Do you know if there's a way of like putting your own log into that site, like with a link or something, to compare faster?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think so. I could go to the log itself. Like if you click the name on the left, it does bring you to the log, and then from here, I could go to. Maybe I should have done this. Casts. Let's do that. Yeah. Oh, okay. If I actually read what it tells me not to get the whole URL, but to grab this part right here only.
I don't think it'll work because you try to compare a mythic log to a heroic log.
Yeah, that's right. I did forget this was mythic. Thank you. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, my mistake. But that should work if you could just find the log and you were doing mythic, for example, that would be a way to do it faster. One thing you have to be careful of is if you're looking at this graph on the cast bar, this graph on the cast page, it only shows one target by default. For someone Vile Fiend, it doesn't have a target, so that's fine. Reason I got taken aback is because right here it said 2 Grimoire Felguards. But when I clicked it, I only saw 1. That's because the other one's hidden. So again, I'm just slow, basically. He got his at 2:12. I got mine at 2:45. So that's likely where I'm falling behind, and why the major cooldowns. We can look at the last thing of Tyrant. So I got 4. He got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So same thing. I'm just slow, probably. This would be like the starting point, I guess. Just make sure that. And I looked at not Facecraft. I looked at Kel'Thuzad because that's where I personally need the most improvement. But if you're just at a baseline trying to figure out, so again, so let's just say like I'm picking up a new spec. Like I hadn't played Demonology yet, and I just want to make sure that I know, aside from mechanics, aside from like immune phases or double damage phases, or the boss just being off the map, that I understand and know how to play my class like correctly, I guess. You want to go to like a boss with like the least mechanics, which probably technically is Terragru, but Terragru has anima powers, which means you don't actually know if you're playing right. So next class is Guardian. And you would do the same thing though. Yeah. So that, I guess, is the long-winded question of how do you improve and is looking at rankings the best? Looking at rankings is good if you've already done all these steps that I just did, and you didn't see like a major, like I saw some major improvement I could do on KT because like I was just missing a cast or two of my cooldowns. If I was getting those already and I was still at 60-70%, then you want to go look at rankings because maybe it's not something that's so obvious. Maybe it's not about how your class plays. Maybe it's not about how the boss does mechanics. Maybe there's just something like unique to that fight that you didn't consider. And that's where the rankings can actually tell you that kind of info. I wouldn't go there first. I would say looking at rankings for improvement is basically the last resort. If you've already tried everything else and nothing else like helped, then let's see if it's something like, I guess, like hidden in that the rankings are doing. I just want to throw in so mostly kind of just for tanks and healers, because I was mentioning that they're much more cooperative than DPS, even at a heroic level. That's one thing this fight's very good for, is I can look at Painsmith. Let's say I'm a Guardian Druid and my co-tank's a Vengeance DH. I can look at how, if for some reason it gives you healing logs, it just does. But these are fights where, we'll ignore that because it's 3 healed, where the 2 tanks were Guardian Druid and Vengeance DH, and we can see how they cooperate to, who has the boss win, who does what job win, stuff like that. And the same thing for healers. Let's say the healing roster is this. And we can see like when the rest of Druid's using her abilities or his abilities, and when the Mistweaver's is using his or her abilities. Because like I said before, you can't just all use them at the same time. Obviously, like there's healing needed at 2 minutes 40, 0, 40, and 5, but you can't have just like, obviously the Mistweaver can't do it all. And if everyone tries to do it at 1 minute, then no one's going to have anything at 2 minutes. So that's one thing the site's good for, is the cooperation aspect. And
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So looking at it from like a recruitment standpoint, and maybe this is going to be covered in the next session or whatever, but like I'm looking at someone else's logs to decide whether or not, maybe that they're a good fit for our raid team. What are the key like things that I should be looking for?
Yeah, I'll go in more detail in like the part 2, which is mostly for stuff like that, like recruitment or like
recruitment and
raid
raid
stuff.
leads of other teams.
But I can hit on like the key points at least.
I can wait till the next session. I mean, I'll be in that one too, so
sure. But it's only like a minute, because the biggest thing is, let me just organize with this a bit. The biggest thing I use or would use is, like I mentioned raid.subcreation. So let's say, looking at Flolock, so I see he plays most Demonology, 1 Painsmith pull, and I just want to make sure that basically just, I'm looking for red flags, for example. So I went to Remnant, I can see his talents here. And sometimes, so I look at, make it a little easier, just look at Demonology only. So every now and then the first talent changes. So I want to make sure that's like not out of reason, I guess. You can see he should be running Demonic Strength, but it's not like the end of the world be running Dreadlash. And it's like that makes sense here that the lower numbers, except for this one, 2 of the 3 lower numbers come with Dreadlash. So that makes sense. But I can also see that if I sort by date, that Dreadlash was used early on, and then Demonic Strength, the better talent, later, which means it was probably just like knowledge issue. Same thing for trinkets down here. You can look at stuff like that. So if you don't know the class, you don't know the spec, you don't know, all you have is like a name, and you're wondering whether or not you should like pursue it, I guess. I would use this site because you can just look at all bosses. For example, this there's a third talent in this row besides Demonic Strength and Dreadlash that I have not seen in any of these pulls yet. I don't even know it off the top of my head because like it's that bad. But if I pulled up a recruit and they were always using that talent, always, and their damage was bad, that's basically a red flag. If they were using like a bad talent but their damage was still like good, then maybe they just like it better. And depending on what you're doing, like that's fine. But if you're taking a bad talent and your damage is bad, there's probably a reason, and that could be it. Yeah. And same thing for legendaries and covenants. I would look at those three things: talents, covenants, legendaries. I wouldn't really go into soulbinds or conduits. That's too deep, especially if you're just looking at recruits, I think. Stepping away from like Warcraftlogs itself a bit. So let's just say, so we're still focusing on improvement. Say that went through all the steps that we just talked about, looked at where I can improve if I'm dying, looked at where I can improve if I'm not dying, looked at how I can improve my talent choices, blah, 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 everything we've already done. And it's still, I do that and it still isn't enough. I'm still like hitting like 90, like 89, 90 barrier. I'm trying to get 100 for whatever reason. I just can't. One thing, the easiest thing you can look at is back to Raidbots. So you might just be like wearing red gear, because even if I pulled up, right, if I had rankings for demonology, I'm looking at trinkets, and so like I can say like I think I can say I think I need Ruby and Ooze, because like majority of people are running them, top like 10 are all running them, but there's still some other things showing up, and I mean there's gotta be a reason. Like it's not just everyone running the same two trinkets, because if they were just the best, then it wouldn't be 85%, it'd be 100%. Or maybe they are the best, but because they're both Mythic Plus trinkets, maybe I got one for my vault, but one not, and maybe there's my level discrepancy, and I'm not sure what I should be using, basically. And you've gone through like the fundamental steps, and you come to the point where maybe it is just gear. Maybe your gear is that last like 1 or 2% you need to break through. You could do any of the so top gear, gear compare, and drop optimizer are the three you can use there. They all do the same thing, which is just like I said. Let's just say I switch stuff around from that because I'm a destruction. Let's say I'm not sure if I should be running a 246 changeling or not a ruby, the ooze. Ooze at 252 instead. I don't even need to have it in my bags. I can just say, what if I got a 252 ooze? Should I replace my 246 changeling? And it'll go, you can queue, and then you don't need to wait for it. You can just go do something else. Top gear, you need to use a SimC add-on, which I don't have, or I don't have it ready. That's gonna look at all gear in your bags. But like I said, if you're just trying to do like 1 or 2 things, like what if scenario, even if you don't have the item, you don't need to go through that. You can just manually do it. And then Droptimizer kind of does the middle ground. It does the what if, but for every item, basically. Every item that you tell it to, at least, right? So I could say, no, dungeons, there it is. So all dungeons, what if I got a 252 item from any dungeon? Like how big is it? What do I need it to be? Stuff like that. Let's say I ran it, and then this is my what if scenario. What if any of these items appeared in my weekly vault out of 15? So I can say, okay, right. If that 252 shows up in my vault, I definitely want it. That's the biggest item I can get. It's a pretty big item. It's a pretty big upgrade overall. That might be what I need to get from like a 97 to a 99. And then there's some small upgrades. I mean, pants are still pretty big, especially if it's one of these 3. And it goes kind of small from there, but that's the idea. I don't need to. A lot of people use just one of these 2, just the gear compare or top gear, to see what they should wear, given what they have. Not a lot of people say, okay, what should I actually look for? A better idea, I guess, not an example necessarily, is a 12 weekly chest, because if you recall, a 12 weekly chest is the highest upgrade, 246. That's as much as you can get to it with Valor, basically. So if you just try hard enough, you can guarantee any of the items at 246, which means this is a pretty useful sim, because this means, okay, is there any essentially guarantee item I can go get right now that will improve my damage? It's still useful to look at it for raid and weeklies, 15s, but that's not farmable. That just gives you an idea of of what you should hope for, not necessarily what you can work towards.
There's also a version of this site for healers too.
I thought you were telling me the name of the site itself. Sorry. Yeah.
And you just go to live. I think it's somewhere else. Yeah.
But
you have to actually import a character.
Yeah.
It's not as on the fly nice as Raidbots, but it has the same optimizer stuff and everything.
That's a good point. I did forget to mention that this is of course damage only. For this site at least. Sorry, yes. This you can go into. This is for healers. I guess tanks. There's not really for tanks. I guess the best idea is just to look at a class guide and look at where look at BIS list or your main 2 stats, because the tanks are the hardest to find gear upgrades with numbers. You can have a feeling it's better, know that it should be better, but not by how much necessarily. Tanks and heal or DPS, Raidbots and healers, QE live. Those will help you out. I did forget. I did. Sorry. I think I said that's gonna be the last thing. I did forget about one thing until just now. So when I mentioned that before, I forget where we go. And it's the reason I forgot about it is because it's kind of like the last resort, I guess. If you're just kind of lost, or you don't know, none of those things helped. It's not a gear issue, whatever. You can try WowAnalyzer. It's kind of gone, I guess, downhill, you could say. Just because it hasn't been updated so much recently. And same thing with the Raidbots. It requires someone who knows about your class to go in and set it up, kind of. And it usually gives you a warning when I click on, yeah. It's like it's not been updated. So usually you'll see this, which means I don't really. I try to avoid using it nowadays, but it does still have some details, mostly about cooldown usage. So I can see had I come here before, I could have seen a lot quicker that, yeah, okay, I'm very, very clearly missing Vile Fiend casts. But it's also going to tell me things like, I'm not using Demonic Circle Teleport enough. Like, okay, yeah, sure, I definitely need to just teleport on cooldown. That makes sense. So this requires more knowledge to know what to read and what to ignore. But as an overview, it does have some actually nice things, no matter the fight, no matter the spec. Such as I can see if I was wasting shards. So it's wasted a few here. That's just probably could have something better. Is my pet active? Like actually hitting things, or is it just like standing still? Right. And then it's particularly good. I shouldn't say good. Even if it says it hasn't been updated, right? You can ignore the overview and look at things like mana efficiency for healers, right? Healing per mana. So if you don't know, even if you know like the theory of what heal should be better to cast when, it might not be like necessarily true in this fight or stuff like that. Doesn't work here. Triage is good. That tells you like depends on the class. You have to know like your job as a healer. Like obviously, Resto Shaman doesn't really do triage because they don't really try to save people's lives at the last second. They're putting hots on the raid to keep everyone healthy, not to save a life. But you can still see like single target heal on people when they're getting pretty low, 24%, 30%, stuff like that. And does go into, who else is in this? Does have some nice things per spec. No. All right, let me see. I want a Resto Shaman. Same thing, so it tell you like, it basically tells you to ignore the overview. But does have specific spec things. I don't know why it didn't load. That's annoying. Let's try a different pull. Huh. Okay, well, it's supposed to give you detailed info about one thing that I hope, again, maybe might not be here anymore, is yes, you can see like really, really specific stuff, such as Beacon of Light. Lost one cast during Beacon of Light because it says line of sight, but it probably means out of range. Because can't really line of sight in the 9. And how much cooldown reduction you got effectively from your talent. Damage reduction, because damage reduction doesn't show as HPS, even though it's effectively HPS, right? If you're less healing needs to be done, same thing as healing basically. And that won't show in logs, but that still is effective. And you can see like really, really specific detail stuff, like how much did you move? How many stacks did you waste? Blah, blah, blah. But unless you're going here for a reason to look at. I wouldn't come here to anything on WowAnalyzer at all without knowing exactly what page you're going to go to it or what you're going to look for when you go here. I mean, I guess that wraps up, I guess, like the class